And so I didn't know, and kind of started reading up on serial killers and stuff when I was a little kid. I'm like, what is this all about? And then I would make music with my friends, and punk rock music, industrial music. And in a lot of the music we would sample things. And I would sample serial killers. I'd sample news articles or news outlet, media things into my music to make it, more dark and crazy and whatever. So I always had this interest.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining us again on the Another Nobody podcast with me, your host, Travis Myers. Today we got part one of a two-part episode with Justin Evans, a for real and for true podcast celebrity. And many of you may know him from Generation Y, which is one of the top 10 true crime podcasts that are going right now. Been doing it for quite a long time. And or The Peripheral, which is another excellent show that he does. And I highly suggest you take a look at. If you don't know him, listen to both. That's it. No more nonsense. Let's get started.
Right.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Today I got a very special guest. He is my friend here, Justin Evans. And well, I'm not going to go on because I just told you in my preview how we know each other. So here we go. Justin, how are you, my friend?
Doing good this morning. How are
you?
Good.
So happy to get together with you.
Yeah. So we were talking about doing this interview for a while, and I've never really been the one that's in the hot seat, the one that does the talking. So I'm going to do my best today.
Well, that's kind of what I liked about the idea of it, is exactly that. You interview everybody else, and as a, can I say, celebrity podcaster, you have so many fans who have never heard your story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You usually tell everybody else's stories. Mm-hmm. So now, we're gonna flip it. We're gonna flip it over on you to see how it works. So you like being in a hot seat?
We'll find out. We'll see how well of a storyteller I am.
Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna do just fine. So yeah, let's hop right into it now.
Yeah.
So, you're from Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
Correct. That's what I thought. Because I know there's a Kansas City, Kansas, and some people get them mixed up.
Yeah. And don't ever mix them up, because people from Missouri are like, I'm absolutely not from Kansas. There's like a divide.
I'm sure there is. Yeah. A little rivalry there.
Yeah.
So yeah, let us know. How did you, because Kansas City too, unfortunately, for people who don't know, it's about 500,000 people, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, demographically, it's made up of everybody. Everybody lives in Kansas City. People here in New York, we think Kansas City, I'm sure the people on the West Coast do the same thing. They think, wilderness countries, cowboys, barbecue.
Yeah.
That's all that they can think of. But really, it is a very cosmopolitan place.
It is.
And although it is quite often in the top 5 or 10 cities for violent crime, it also has multimillionaires who live in beautiful, beautiful homes and estates.
Yeah, yeah. And if you take all the suburbs around Kansas City, it's over 2 million, maybe 2.5 million. And I don't, when I think of Kansas City, I think of the suburbs, because you drive 15 minutes, you're in the burbs.
Yes.
So to me, it's not a separation. Because I know in like New York, neighborhoods are neighborhoods. Like there is separations, like, oh, you're on the east side, you're on the west side. Whereas in Kansas City, yeah, there's neighborhoods, but we have over 2 million people. I always count it that way. And something weird happened when I was growing up back in the 80s and 90s. Kansas City had a huge music scene, huge punk rock scene, and was super cool. And then something happened. Like it all went away for a while. And I'm like, are we a cow town again? Like what happened?
Right. Yeah. So is that how you grew up? Your teenage years, you were like a punk rock skater kid deal?
Yeah, I would say I was heavily influenced by my brother and sister. My brother was really into classic rock, metal, and industrial music. And my sister was really into punk rock, and like folk punk, like, Violent Femmes and that kind of stuff and whatever. And they pretty much molded my entire, like, I don't know, taste in music. And so Kansas City used to have all these small venues, all this stuff, and it still does. But you used to be able to just drive down the road and run into like some punk rock show in an alleyway. That doesn't happen anymore. That doesn't, those days
Well,
are
it's,
long
that's
over.
not that's not just Kansas City. That's everywhere now. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be music. Well, live music was a thing. Being a professional musician was, a real trade. And yes, I know it is now, but not the way it was. I mean, back to my grandfather's time, everything was live music. You went out to see live music, and that progressed into my parents' time, and then again, even for myself. We've talked in the past. I'm a big punk rock guy. You
Yeah.
know, and I liked punk rock in particular. I think, and I think you'll agree with me. Besides that, it's a little edgy, a little rebellious, sure, but it also tends to be a little bit more intellectual,
Yeah.
and a lot more honest
Mhm.
than what you would normally hear on the radio. And so that was always the attraction to me. I imagine the same for you.
Yeah. It had purpose.
Yes.
There was, you go from the Dead Kennedys to, even Rage Against the Machine or something, that a modern day band. They always had some sort of political leaning or something they were raging against, something they were talking about. Yeah, you have the punk rock songs that are just like, I'm drunk in an alley with my six pack, but then you have the ones that are like, this is what the government's doing to us today. You should know about it.
Yes,
And
yes.
that was the allure.
Well, that's what
And
I liked is how it did run the gamut from, I mean, punk, hardcore, ska-core. We can
yeah,
go on and on with all the different little mini genres that are in there. Oh, you got Yaba. There you go with your Halloween shirt. Very good. Very good. Um, but it did run the gamut where, somebody like Joe Jackson, you're almost listening to jazz,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And then, of course, when you're talking about, oh, geez, help me out here. There's somebody like Misfits,
yeah,
massively popular, but nowhere near. When I say the quality, don't get me wrong, I'm not insulting the Misfits, but it is the quality of music, the quality of is a very different world, you know. But it all falls into that punk category
yeah,
because they're doing something that is art, their own art.
yeah,
It's their own expression. They're not trying to fit into a box in order to get on the radio because chances are they won't be getting on the radio.
yeah. And that was always my thing is, people would be like, oh, Steve Vai or Eddie Van Halen, the best guitarists ever. And I'm like, yeah, but I could listen to a Ramones song and it'll catch you. It's just three chords, two notes, whatever it is, and you're into it.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah,
funny, my brother, when we were kids, running around New York City and going to shows and, you know, discovering music for the first time as you do when you're a teenager, he used to call like a lot of that classic rock stuff, like you would just Van Halen or bands like that. He would call it Jersey Nice Kid music because although and some of those songs are great, they do stick with you. They'll hook you. I'm not
yeah,
going to knock them for that. I have my favorites in the classic rock
mhm,
world, but um, there is again no edge and no honesty to it, and
no,
that's an
it's
interesting.
it's so produced, and
Exactly.
yeah. And so growing up, I wasn't really into sports. Didn't like the at the time there was the jock kids, the kids that played football and all the sports. And and I graduated high school in 95. So that gives you an idea of my time frame. And the jock kids, they'd beat up the skaters. They'd pick on other people. So I'm like, well, I don't want to hang out with them. Then you have the drama kids and the whatever. And it was just like, well, I found my tribe with the other, you know, degenerates and rejects in the school. And they happened to be like the skate punks.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, well, we respect each other. And there was all race. There was nothing mattered. Like, a Filipino kid, a black kid, a Mexican kid. We did not care because we were all the lowest rung of the ladder here in the pecking order of this
Yeah.
school. And so there was no racism. It was totally just like, we're here together going through it.
Yeah,
There's,
we were able to find a commonality.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And, and I just really look back on those kind of days, and I was just very nostalgic. Um, there was, uh, there was a punk rock club called the Outhouse that was out in the middle of a cornfield in Kansas. This couldn't exist today. This wouldn't
No,
happen.
no.
It was like a bunch of skinheads, but they were sharps, skinheads against racial prejudice. They're like just crazy people ran this place. And it was essentially one of those bathrooms, like a rest stop bathroom with two sides, and it just had been gutted, and it was a punk rock club.
It sounds so punk rock too,
Yeah,
right?
it is the most communal anarchist. We all came together and made this cool fucking thing.
All
So
right.
yeah, that's kind of my childhood in a nutshell. Going out to a cornfield and, slam dancing to, random ass bands that came through. But we did have like, Fugazi and Helmet and Body Count played there. Who, like
When
what the
guys are
hell?
on tour, when bands are on tour, they have to find a place to play.
Yeah.
And everybody has to start somewhere too.
Yeah.
These guys, if they're signed at all, are signed to a small label,
Yeah.
not to a large label, and they got to find a home for the night, especially
Yeah.
Sunday through Thursday when nothing's going on.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a documentary about the outhouse that one of my friends made, and it's so hilarious though, because every single band that came through there, whether it was Ice-T, Biohazard, whatever, they all are like, everyone can play CBGBs, everyone can play at the Whiskey, but it's a badge of honor to play at the outhouse. Like that was the real shit. And I'm like, because you could die. There was no rules. So that was kind of a lot of my childhood. And I just remember like in high school, least likely to succeed. No girl would even talk to me. It was, it was just the punk rock skater lifestyle.
right.
And skateboarding was not popular. In Kansas City, you could be arrested for skateboarding. And it was like,
You could be arrested for skateboarding in Kansas City.
yeah, it was a $500 fine and up to 6 months behind bars.
Right.
And it was essentially it was loitering.
Tracy talked to me.
Yeah. And we didn't have skate parks then. We didn't have anything. So you just had to skate wherever. And, merchants, store owners, we were a nuisance. So you could be arrested for it. I had been arrested multiple times in my teenage years. One time was for skateboarding, but they essentially dropped the charges and just drove me home and told my mom.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your mom was, they told my mom, we caught your son skateboarding. And my mom's like, and is there something more to this story? Like, so yeah, it was.
That's like hard to be. But I remember, what was it? Clint Eastwood. All right. He's still around, Clint Eastwood,
Yeah.
right? He became mayor of Carmel, California. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they were giving him a hard time, something to do with a pub. He owned a bar or a pub, a restaurant, and they wouldn't let him do something that he thought was ridiculous. So he became mayor and changed the laws. But one of the laws that I could not believe, well, two of the laws that I couldn't believe, in Carmel, California, which you would think would be, super rich, super progressive,
Yeah.
you weren't allowed to eat ice cream in the street. So you couldn't walk down the street with an ice cream cone. And I think it was women could not wear high heels on the street. Silly stuff. Silly stuff.
And I know a lot of those laws are just on the books, but are never enforced. But
Right.
why don't we ever go through and purge those out? Why don't we ever go through and, but they don't.
I don't know.
So,
But now this, so, although you're, a rotten, degenerate, useless punk rock kid getting locked up for skateboarding in Kansas City. I'm never going to fix Kansas City locking people up for skateboarding. That's crazy.
yeah,
But then, much like myself, what did you do when you turned 17?
I joined the military.
You did. You did.
But I won't say that I like voluntarily joined.
Did the judge make you go?
No, I came
Okay.
home one day to my mom and a recruiting officer,
Mhm.
and they ambushed me, and they were like, "You need to get your life together."
Yeah.
Now they weren't wrong, but because at that point I was probably selling weed and just in with bad crowds, but um, I I had switched schools. I'd been kicked out of my school, and I started at a new high school, and I had new friends.
Mhm.
And I started getting involved in like theater, and I was like directing the school play. So by the time this comes around, I'm like kind of already doing better, but whatever. So I went into the military. I went into the army, and they didn't have any jobs because this was 1994. I was a split op, so you would go to basic training in between your junior and senior year, and then you'd get come back, do your senior year in high school, and then go back to do your advanced training, your MOS training.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
Is this like a National Guard thing, or was it active
It
duty?
was for everybody at the time. I
Okay.
was supposed to be regular army, but because my job was obsolete
Mhm.
decades before I even signed on the dotted line, I ended up being Army Reserves.
Okay.
So I was a weekend warrior because they didn't actually have a valid MOS for me. Uh, and it was really frustrating because at the time, 1994, I signed up to be a 74 Charlie, which was telecommunications. And I was learning how to type on a teletype, which is this massive typewriter that wouldn't even fit on my computer desk with a big cable coming out. And that's how you would send messages between bases.
Yes.
Windows 95 was out by this point. Like, we had computers, but I'm learning how to type on a fucking teletype. So
Right.
my job was obsolete, and I am a little bitter about that, but I honestly do not regret my time in the military. Even though I just went through basic training and advanced training, it I think everyone should kind of go through some sort of form of boot camp. I think it really shows you what your limits are, what you're capable
I
of.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely
Um,
agree. And I
yeah.
think personally, I've had this conversation with many other people. I don't think necessarily that it needs to be a military thing. If you're a pacifist or if
Mm,
you are, of any one of these different religions we allow in this country, because we have freedom of religion, that doesn't allow you to go in the military, that's fine. But you should be, I don't know, delivering mail or flipping eggs or a janitorial service, something of this nature where you're taken away from your family, from your home, from your hometown. You're allowed something that I always say the best thing I ever did in my life was going to the military. All right,
mm,
got me out of my neighborhood. And my mother didn't introduce me to my recruiter, but when I said I was going, she was so happy
yeah.
because, and again, my brother and I both went in. We signed up at 17.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I left until I was actually 18, but we had
Yeah.
signed up at 17, and but it, for lack of a better word, helped me to be a man. Maybe not made a man out of me, but it helped me to be a man in that, man, you are on your own. You got a
Yeah.
lot of stuff you got to deal with, and you realize that people from all over the country are going through the same things you are,
Yeah.
you know? And the second thing I think was the second best thing I did was leaving the service. And not because I'm hating on the army, which I had a decent time when I was there, but that there was so much more to the world
Yeah.
than doing 20 or 30 years in the military. For
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
you know, for me.
And for me, obviously the job I trained on was completely obsolete. So none of the skills, at least technical skills that I was learning from the military were going to help me in the real world at all. So the only thing it really helped me with was discipline, knowing that, hey, when you think you absolutely have to give up and you have a drill sergeant breathing down your neck, you can keep going. You'll push way past whatever you think your limit is. You're actually way stronger than you think you are. So that was a good, I guess, lesson learned, and I take that from it. I will say that the military did show me that life isn't fair, And that is a lesson that is a hard pill to swallow when you learn it. But this stupid story, but when I was in basic training, we had to set up a claymore mine for like a test. And you had to take this wire and hook it up to the claymore, and then you run it back, and you had to tie it off to a tree and then set things up and whatever. Whole process to this thing. And we had a cadet from West Point actually judging us that day. Now, drill sergeants, cadets, they can mess with you all day long, and drop you for anything, say you didn't make your bed right. But when it came time to testing to pass something, that was when I was like, no, this is all fair and square. Like, I'm trying to do something accurate here. And this cadet untied my wire from the tree and failed me on that test.
Really?
And I was like, oh, life isn't fair.
Yeah.
People in charge and power can do whatever they want
Mm-hmm.
and fail you. And that was a life lesson I learned. Probably is what made me pretty, I don't know, anti-authoritative. It's like, okay, so there are no rules now. I don't have to play by them anymore. Thank you for showing me that.
Yeah.
I can lie, cheat, and steal because you just did. Not that I'm a bad guy.
And this was a West Point cadet?
Yeah, they'd come into boot camp to give like the drill sergeants a day off.
Right.
And so the West Point cadets were even meaner than the drill sergeants. They were so much worse.
I'm sure so many of them are probably, if not wealthy, better off to begin with. And here they are in West Point, and they kind of got that frat boy mentality that we all love so much, and he was picking on you.
Yeah, and they were getting hazed in West Point, I'm sure. So now they get to do the hazing on us little, worms in boot camp. So yeah, but that was when I learned like, okay, life isn't fair, and I'm glad I learned it with such a minor lesson, such as that, not something way more extreme. But I was just like, okay, now I know, and at that point, I knew that I could cut corners, I could do whatever I wanted to pass tests because it didn't matter anymore. But I still was a hard worker. I still had a high work ethic and just integrity in life. I just knew that like, if you cut a corner here and there, it doesn't matter because people can cut corners on you anytime.
Now I know you said something about communications, right? When you came out, I know you for a long time you were in IT. You did IT work.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is that something you went to school for? Did the Army help you at all with that?
No, it didn't help me. I don't want to make this like an Army bashing thing, but like,
well, I have to say for myself too. The stuff I did in the Army, it did not help me.
Yeah.
And well, again, it helped me be the man I am.
Yeah.
But there was nothing I could use after the fact.
It builds character, but it's completely useless or practical in the real
outside
world.
Of the Army. Yeah. Once we're not calling in airstrikes, I haven't called it an airstrike since I left. So.
Yeah. No, I was working at some distressed freight place where we would buy like, Yellow Freight or FedEx or whatever. If they have a bunch of deliveries that are lost, then they just sell all that crap in auction. My company would buy that, and then I would have to figure out what it was and price it. And I was in charge of the electronics and computers.
Okay.
So in order to price a computer or price computer parts, I had to know what they were. Yes. So I learned computers on my own by pricing them. Then I learned how to build them. And then I worked at this little place called Gateway 2000.
I remember that name. I don't know what it is, but I remember that name.
It was a computer company that was in Sioux City or something. It was, yeah. And so I did.
Did they build and sell computers?
Yeah, it was the cow
products.
It was the cow print computer. Do you remember the cow print computers?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Gateway. And so I did tech support for them, zero schooling. All self-taught. And then, so that was back in the 90s. And I mean, my first job, I was, some shit part-time job. I was making $4 an hour. But then by the time 1997 rolled around, I'm working at Gateway and I'm making $8 an hour.
Yeah.
I'm living like a king. $8 an hour in 1997. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm doing great. But this whole time, I've really kind of started cutting myself off from the family because from my earliest memories, I think my brother was schizophrenic and just,
And now you're the
yeah,
youngest, right?
yeah, yeah. So I had an older brother and an older sister. Brother was 5 years older than me. Sister was 2 years older than me, Chris and Megan. Um, they were born January 10th and January 12th. So their birthdays were right next to each other. And at this time where I'm doing all this stuff and trying to take care of myself, get this good high paying job, whatever. And this whole time in my family, I'm considered the black sheep. Like they're like, Justin's never going to do anything with his life. He's just never going to get anywhere. Now I'm in the military. Now I'm working at a computer company, and my family's kind of like, oh, he's actually putting this shit together. But I'm so resentful towards them because they've been like so dismissive of me my entire life. I'm like, fuck you. But my brother at this time is completely like homeless, living on the streets.
And now he's like, what, 27?
Yeah, probably 27 at the time. And I just distanced myself from him because when somebody is that far gone, with mental health issues, drug addiction, all of those things, you just go through that roller coaster of, oh, they look better today. Oh, they're sober for a week. And then they're not. And after years and years and years of that, I just was like, I'm done. I don't want
But
to be
quite
around you.
often too, and I don't know, every family's different.
Yeah.
But so often, your parents, your aunts, your uncles, you and your sister, yourself, you also lie to yourselves. You lie, well, he's doing better. He will be better. Things will be better. And, sadly, the next day your TV is missing. Sadly, the next day you get a call from the police. Sadly, the next day you literally see him sleeping on the sidewalk. I don't know what the situations are, but like for anybody, especially a young man as you were at the time, it really not only does it start to eat you up, but you can't face the lie anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And reality is so harsh and so cold, that what do you do? What do you do? You have to turn it off for your own mental health.
And my mom, of course, your mom is always going to be there for their
Yes.
child. They're never going to give up if they're a truly loving parent. And she was always there and trying to help him, which she was helping him. But after a while, it's like you kind of enable this person to continue this lifestyle. And at the time, back in the 90s, we didn't have the mental health care. We didn't have the treatment facilities for drug addiction that we do today. Not that we even have great ones today, but it wasn't the same.
Let me ask you this. I don't want to cut you off. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Do you think, or do you know, was part, you say you believe your brother now, you believe him to be schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But do you think did his drug use begin with that whole opioid crisis, which really hit the Midwest very hard at that time? Or was it more of a straight to drugs? When I say drugs,
Yeah.
they're all drugs.
Yeah.
The prescription, the usual march for suburbia of prescription drugs into illicit drugs. Or did he jump straight into illicit drugs?
He jumped straight into illicit drugs back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I look at it as he was sort of self-medicating for his problems.
Yeah.
I don't think he was ever actually diagnosed with schizophrenia, but going back and thinking about his behaviors, his actions, the things he would say, I'm like, oh yeah, he was hearing voices. He was imagining things that weren't there. He had a lot of problems.
And he never got the help that he needed.
No. And so then by 2004, I had been estranged from him. Like we had not spoken in years. And my sister was trying to get a hold of him, couldn't get a hold of him, and went to his apartment and found him on the floor, and he'd been dead for days, and the entire apartment complex smelled.
Yeah.
And she called, the police, whoever, and I went down there to be like, what's going on, to be there for her and my mom. And everyone in the apartment complex was just complaining about the smell. They didn't realize that it was my brother's rotting dead body.
Yeah.
They were just like, oh, there's sewer, it smells like shit in here. And
No.
And
But we used to get it for so many times, in my time in the police department.
Yeah.
It was, you would get a call for a foul odor.
Yeah.
And everybody knew, our job knows what that means.
Yeah.
Foul odor means you're going to find a body. And it is, at first people say, oh, is the sink coming up? Is it the sewer outside? What is that smell? And sure enough, somebody's passed away.
Yeah. It's a dead body. And, that was, it didn't hit me that hard because I had stopped speaking to him, because I just was like, I can't deal with this. I can't have that hope, then be let down. And sadly, it kind of set my idea at the time. I was like, you can't help other people. They'll never change. Give up on them. And that's kind of a shitty way to look at the world, but it was definitely how I felt at the time. So that just sort of...
And how old are you now at this stage?
48. So...
No, not now, today.
Oh, at the time
of your father's passing, your brother's passing. Rather.
Yeah, so I think he was 32, and I'm 5 years younger than him, so I was like 27-ish, 26. So that was like me. I'd gotten computer jobs, I'd moved on, and had a pretty successful life, at least.
You're a very stable guy at this stage of the game.
Yeah. And, I'm doing my thing, but I've distanced myself from my family. I've distanced myself from my brother. And, I never got support from them. So I'm doing everything on my own. Very, punk rock, do it yourself kind of lifestyle here, but we're all Gen X. So, this is how we had to roll. So that was an interesting, I guess, time of my life, because I would just, one day, I'm like, I'm moving to California. I met a girl. I'm just going to go. And I would just pack my shit and go. And this is like before Google Maps. I would pack my stuff, and I'm like, I'm driving west. I'm going. And then once I got closer to California to be with this girl, I'm like, all right, how do I get to her house? And like
luckily you had that good military training. You knew how to read a map.
Yeah. How many people don't know how to read a map today? I'm like, how do you?
Did you end up moving to California then?
I moved to California a couple times for a few years, both in 99 and 2004, right after my brother died. But I just was out there for like a year or two each time. So I'm definitely a Kansas City, local, but I'd moved out to California a few times. So it was a little bit of a different life back then. And so I met my wife at the time.
Was she the California girl?
Yeah, she was the California girl.
You know what, Justin? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Well, if we take a break for a second here, and then we'll talk about the turn in your life.
Yeah.
Once you meet your wife to be.
That sounds good.
Listen up, this one's important. As a rule, I never stump for charities, because most of them don't hand out as much money as they collect, and that's a sad fact. But not Tunnel to Towers. These guys do the right thing. They have an A+ rating from Charity Watch, and a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. That's like the #1 charity watchdog group, with over 93% going towards the families of veterans and first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty. For only $11 a month, and it's easy. Just go to t2t.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org, and hit the donate button. Do the right thing, and do good for the families and the veterans and the first responders who do good by you. It's only $11 a month. Thanks, and all the best.
Yeah.
Okay. We were just talking about you moving out to California. I don't know if it was the first time or not, to meet your to-be wife. You did get married to this woman, yes?
Yes. Yeah. So I met her in 2002, and we'd done the long distance thing for a while. And then I moved out to California right after my brother's death.
So I'm curious now, and again, did you meet her online? Is it one of those deals?
Oh no, I was out in California just hanging out with friends one day, and they were like, "Hey, I'm busy. You should hang out with this other person I know." And so they call up Melissa, and Melissa says, "I'm not hanging out with some stupid redneck from Kansas. Don't drop him off at my house." And I'm like, "I'm from Missouri."
Yeah.
Because, everyone from California and New York, we're the flyover states over here. You don't give a shit about the Midwest. So, but I ended up meeting her. I got dropped off at her house, and she took me to an 80s club, and we got along ever since. And it was kind of crazy time. She wanted to buy a house. That doesn't happen in California, not even in 2004. So she ended up moving back to Kansas City with me, and we ended up buying a house here. So we were together, from 2002 until 2007, and that's when we got married. So we were together
You
5
lived
years.
together for 5 years before getting married.
Yeah. And so we did our thing. We were doing pretty well. And yeah, and I kept moving up the ladder in my job, my corporate job in IT. And I was really successful because I got a job doing executive services where I would support the CEO and all the direct reports and the board of directors and everybody. I was the IT kind of butt boy guy to them. I'd run and do whatever they needed to keep doing their job. So if their phone died, I'd get them a new phone. If their laptop died, I'd be handing them a new one. And I was on call 24/7. It was
So
crazy.
things were looking bright. Things were looking good.
Yeah. But then I guess at that point, I'm sort of over the corporate job. Podcasts are a thing, but back then there's not a lot of podcasts around. There's
Was this when you fell into the podcast world?
Yeah, it was 2012 was when I started my podcast.
Right. And what are we talking about now as far as, just so I get the timeline right?
Yeah.
You're living in Kansas City with your wife.
Yeah.
And you're getting kind of tired of the corporate thing. Was it your love of true crime that started prior to the podcast? Or did you think, geez, this is kind of for lack of a better word, use my street vernacular, this is a good angle for me?
No, I'd always, even when I was a kid, and I grew up in California, like when I was, in elementary school,
that part. I didn't know you were a California boy to begin with.
It was such a small time in my life. So I was.
What made your parents go to?
They got a divorce, and my mom moved to Kansas City, and I was like in 5th grade when that happened. So up until 5th grade, I was living in California. And that was kind of another reason why I wanted to move back there a couple times, because it was like I remembered.
Well, sure, you had roots.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when I was a little kid, I remember on this TV screen seeing a man's face, and everyone was terrified. And it was Richard Ramirez.
Yes.
And that was like a childhood memory for me. Mm-hmm. Now, thinking back, I'm like, oh, that's probably when they caught him. But I was a little kid. I didn't know. And so I was like, Mom, what's that? And she's like, that's a really bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know, and kind of started reading up on serial killers and stuff when I was a little kid. I'm like, what is this all about? And then I would make music with my friends, and punk rock music, industrial music. And in a lot of the music we would sample things. And I would sample serial killers. I'd sample news articles or news outlet, media things into my music to make it, more dark and crazy and whatever. So I always had this interest in just, true crime, essentially. Wasn't just serial killers, it was everything. And I listened to music that was all about the strange and mysterious, and I'd watch movies about that. And, now podcasts are a thing. And I'm listening to podcasts. And I got a summons to go serve on a jury. And I'm like, my job pays me for jury duty, so I'm not even going to try to get off this jury. I'm just going to sit here and get paid. And it was a first-degree murder trial. Mm-hmm. And, we all watch CSI and Law and Order, and we think we know. You know what the system is because you were part of it.
Yeah.
But most of us...
Sitting there, yeah.
Yeah, most of us, we don't know shit. Yeah. So jury selection was on a Monday morning. I was selected for this jury. Trial started Monday afternoon, and I put a man away for life on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, I thought it would take weeks. I thought there would be more to this.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it could take months. Sometimes it could take hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was shocked because I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. Right. This is different. Mm-hmm. So I went to my friend Aaron and I was like, hey, man, I want to tell the world what jury duty is really like. I want to tell the world like how the system really works, because I learned a lot in this 3 or 4 days that I served on a jury. I learned a lot during my life being arrested and getting in trouble and stuff, but actually sitting on a jury and seeing the process play out, I was like, we don't know shit.
Yeah.
And I want to tell the world. And Aaron's like, sounds like you want to start a podcast.
How did you two hook up? I mean, now I've met Aaron. In fact, I think I might have met Aaron before I met you, to tell you the truth. I think he introduced me to you.
Yeah.
But what do you call it? So you guys were already friends in Kansas City. So did you grow up together? Did you know each other from work?
Oh, it was 1992 or 93. We were working as dishwashers at this shitty little restaurant. And, you got to realize this is early 90s, Midwest. I'm in this restaurant washing dishes, and this guy walks in and he's wearing a Psychic TV shirt, which is this crazy experimental band from like Britain. And I'm like, you listen to Psychic TV?
Yep.
Because, no, like, what are the chances of, some guy in a restaurant,
Now, I have met so many people over the years. There's like a cool T-shirt effect.
Yeah.
Where I don't know anything about you, but if you like this band, okay, there's a chance, all right, that we're on the same team.
Yeah.
Or at least there's a thread that we can share. And it's amazing when that happens. And you can see it, if you've ever been to any of the big things, Warped Tour, big shows like that with this, you walk through and there's all these kids, all these posers, all these guys, every mall in America has got a kid with a Misfits shirt on.
Yeah.
To discount them because they couldn't name a single Misfits song, right?
Yeah.
But they got the shirt because it's a fashion statement.
Yeah.
Or the Rolling Stones shirt that the girl is wearing or whatever it is. Who cares? Yeah. But man, you see that one guy with, I don't know, the Socialist, the Operation Ivy shirt.
Yeah.
All right? One you're wearing right now. And if you got that shirt, chances are we can have a good conversation.
If you know, is the kind of, yeah. And so me and him started talking, and we have this mutual love for music and a lot of things in common. And we became friends. He was older than me. He was a few years older than me. So I was still in high school. I think I was a sophomore in high school. I think he had graduated and moved from Michigan down to Kansas City. And we were dishwashers. So, lowest of the low.
I did it myself.
Yeah. And Aaron likes to tell this story, but, we were shit on because we were dishwashers, and the servers would just yell at us and whatever. And he said that one day the servers, I guess, were yelling at him, and I walked over and I just picked up a plate and I just held it out and dropped it. It shattered on the ground, and the server's like, "What the hell's happening?" And like left Aaron alone. And to that day, Aaron's like, "I like you. You'll step in." Because I'm just like, I don't care. Like, what? It's just a plate. It's not my plate.
Yeah.
Stop yelling at us. We're trying to wash your fucking dishes so you can keep serving people. So we became friends and known each other since the early 90s. And then I bring up this idea, like, I need to tell the world about my jury duty. And he says, sounds like you want to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you want to call it? And I guess I took about 15 seconds. And I was just like, I don't know. Let's just call it Generation Y. Like, no more thought put to it. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do a business analysis and hire some. No, it was just like Generation Y.
Great name. It's a great name.
And it was,
and for our listeners who are not familiar, first of all, if you're not familiar with Generation Y, shame on you. All right. Number two, it's not generation, the letter Y, it's generation WHY, as in asking why.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly successful podcast too, by the way.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was kind of interesting because we were, I don't know, like the second true crime podcast in existence. There definitely was at least a couple before us, but the only one I know of was Dan Spansky, True Murder. He's up in Canada. And he actually came on our show in the early days and gave us a bump. And it was really nice. It was like, oh, this is this big time successful guy. And he took the time to help us out, come on our show and then say, hey, everybody, check out this other true crime podcast. Now there's two of us, like, check it out. So that was really cool. And I always thought, I want to help others out because this guy extended his, hand to us and gave us a huge bump. So that was something in the beginning that Aaron and I definitely would always do, is advise, mentor, give shout outs, and just be really kind to other podcasters.
And as it should be. Yeah. If the whole world literally just, you don't have to necessarily stick your neck out, but you can definitely put your hand out and help somebody up, you know? And if everybody did, I'm not talking about the pod, I mean, just everybody in the world did that once a day, once a week, once a month for somebody else, society would be so much better off for it.
Yeah.
And I do believe, and as myself, kind of an orthodox atheist, so to speak, but I do think that there has been something lost. I might get a little philosophical here, though, with, I don't know, kind of like the old, that old Christian do the right thing ethic that all of our grandparents grew up with. Our parents had that Sunday school, do the right thing, 10 Commandments / Golden Rule type mentality, which I think, sadly, we're losing decade after decade, little bit by little bit, where now people are so selfish, and so uninvolved, so uninvolved in their communities as a whole. But I'm sorry.
I grew up in that generation where it was like you open doors for women. Yeah. You help the old lady cross the street. Yeah. And I realized that in today's world, there are dangerous people, but like, if I saw somebody like trying to load something into their car and they were having trouble, I'd be like, do you need help?
Of course.
I'll help pick up half this refrigerator and put it in the back of your truck. Now, there's Ted Bundys in the world that are like, chloroform you and drag you into the back of their car. But, that's just me. Like, I would be like, hey, do you need help? Like, I'll help you out. And so that was just how I was raised. And even though I was...
it's a good way to be. Yeah. It's a good way to be. And I'll tell you what, I've gotten, not to pat myself on the back, but I will, because I have two great kids that I've never, ever had problems. They're both grown-ups now. They're, 27 and 30. Can you imagine that? And what was I saying? But I was always big, please, thank you, sir, ma'am,
Yeah.
things like this. Mind your manners, be polite. I actually allowed them to curse in front of me because I had a foul mouth, you
Yeah.
know? However, you were never allowed to curse in front of your mother, your grandmother, school teachers, anybody in authority, et cetera, et cetera. You always had respect. And my whole life, well, their whole lives, all I've ever gotten is, your kids are so nice. Oh, they're so polite. I said, no, they're just being the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's that everybody else, now has such foul mouths or such bad attitudes or such snotty attitudes or whatever that you think they're wonderful kids, and they are. They are wonderful kids, but you think they're wonderful kids just because they're being polite,
Yeah.
and helpful, as you say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just, that's just how I was raised. I mean, my mom didn't do a lot of raising, honestly. I just was left out in the cold on my own, drinking from the hose and, whatever.
Well, that's part of that whole Generation X thing.
Yeah. But I at least had something inside of me that was like, do the right thing. Be
Yes.
kind to others. That's it. So, and it was kind of shitty because, when you're skateboarding and you can get in trouble for it, it's like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? So then if I did sell weed, if I did do something wrong, I'm just like, well, I'm going to get in trouble anyways. What's stopping me from doing this now? Because if I can literally be arrested for skateboarding, then I don't care anymore. And that was a shitty attitude to have, but that's, how my brain worked was.
But again, that was a time in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was I don't want to say a phase, but it was a phase in your life that you overcame. You grew up. You grew out of it.
Yeah. But I will say that it's lingered to the point where something else we're going to talk about is kind of, you'll understand how I respond and react to things because of that sort of, oh, you show me that it's not fair. Well, then I need not try anymore, So, but Aaron and I, we started, and, when we started it, we had the intention of just being educational. Like, we just want to talk about these things. We want to talk about how the system works. We want to talk about, just because they find evidence that this guy's innocent doesn't mean he's automatically released from prison. That's not how it works. Just because this guy probably did the crime, but if they didn't have the warrant, correct, he could walk. The system is not perfect. And
not by a long shot.
Yeah.
Not by a long shot. In fact, I think I might have mentioned it on your show when you were kind enough to interview me last year, is, I don't like or believe in the word justice. I don't think there is such a thing as justice.
Yeah.
There's punishment, but justice, no, you never get back what you've lost.
No. And I'm a little bit of an advocate for restorative justice, because if somebody steals my car, I don't want them going to jail. I want them to replace my fucking car. You pay for a new car. You stole it, you pay for it. Now, when it comes to violent crimes, I don't know how you do restorative justice there. But when it comes to property crimes and 90% of the other stuff, I'm like, no, make the perpetrator pay the victim back. Very much an advocate of that, which I think is common sense, but we don't really do that much here in America. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you end up now with somebody who may be in jail, but I'm still out my property.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
I mean, what good is that doing me?
Yeah, it doesn't do me any good. And now he's got a record. He probably can't get a job, and he'll never be able to pay me back. He'll probably just keep offending now because this cycle will, perpetuate itself. And I just, don't know what the answer is, but I don't like how things are going. So that was the whole point of the podcast. And I know that there is a movement now in the true crime world for ethical true crime, because a lot of people, they're kind of shitty. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to talk about the gratuitousness of this. They're just going to glamorize the shit. They're just going to, do it for the dollar,
There's a sad part too, and we're all guilty of it. You and I too. Everybody is. Anybody that ever, from back in the 70s when you're watching Kojak, okay, up until today, whatever the next horrific crime thing is on Netflix, we somehow are attracted to awful things. We're attracted to crime. We're attracted to violence. It's again, back to the Shakespearean days. That's what he wrote about,
Yeah.
and I don't know why we love it, but shame on us. We do, you know? So it's very, very easy to put one of those things out. Like I'll see there's dozens of podcasts for comedy
Yeah.
crime podcasts. Now, from my world, there's nothing, well, I could tell you some funny stories,
Yeah.
but there's nothing funny about the death, the murder, the rape,
No.
the whatever it is, or even get your car stolen. It's not funny,
Yeah.
But yeah, what, I don't want to cut you off. I don't know where you were going with that.
Oh, no.
So you guys started this podcast and it did end up taking off. I mean, like a shot,
Mhm.
Did it take very long? Was that a year or two, or
Oh, no,
were you more into it before it really became a thing, so to speak?
We slowly built our audience. We started in 2012. I don't think we had a very large audience until like 2015, 2016.
Yeah, so it took you 3-4 years.
Yeah. And Serial, a big time podcast, Serial, it came out in 2014. And that kind of put true crime on the map. So everyone that was around before Serial got a huge bump. And then all of a sudden, people know of us, people know of all these other true crime podcasts. So we really just start escalating in popularity. But prior to 2014, I don't remember what my numbers were, but it was probably a few hundred, maybe 1,000 listeners, which, hey, awesome. I had those 1,000 loyal listeners and it was great,
Sure.
But up until 2014, we were just doing it for fun. We were just doing it for our hobby. And to your point, yeah, talking about any crime, any murder is exploitive, is gratuitous, but it's your intention. And I can't control how my listener consumes my material, my content. So if they're listening for educational purposes or if they're listening for entertainment, I can't control that. So the best I can do is just do my best to essentially give the information in a kind, empathetic way and an educational way and not be gratuitous, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's...
Well, and you've done a good job too. I've listened to it many times, in the peripheral, which is kind of a side project for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about true crime, when you talk about a case, you're like, okay, so like me talking about my brother, or, somebody's like, oh, well, they were an alcoholic and then they wrecked their car, or they had a mental health problem, or they were addicted to this and then they committed this crime, or they had a crime committed against them. You have to gloss over addiction. You have to gloss over this mental health problem.
You have to gloss over so many things because you only have so much time to tell a story,
Exactly.
And at the same time, because there is that entertainment value, there's no getting around that. You have that. You're presenting something that I want to listen to entertain, to kill an hour while I'm driving, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I could sit here and we could talk about, addiction or alcoholism or whatever for hours.
Yeah.
We could talk about it for hours. I mean, tell stories, give statistics, go on and on and on and on, causes, whatever else. And the story would never be told.
Yeah.
You would never get to the punchline,
Yeah. And those are always things that I'm like, why do we keep talking about bullshit every day in our lives? Talk about the weather, whatever it is. And we don't talk about the things that impact everyone. I'm sure you know somebody that's an alcoholic. I'm sure you know a woman that's been sexually assaulted. And so to me, it was all of these topics are always on the peripheral when they should be mainstream.
Oh, that's where you came up. I didn't know where you got the name.
So the peripheral was, I don't want to gloss over these topics the way we do in true crime. I want to focus on them, and they're always on the peripheral, and I want them to be mainstream topics. So that was the inception of the peripheral. Yeah.
Yes.
And
well, I'll tell you, I think one of, I think I told you, I never listened to podcasts until I was on one.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's just, like anything, I guess it becomes a generational thing where I was again, once removed, being a little bit older. And it was, I knew what they were, never paid attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I started listening to myself, because I wanted to hear myself, I was like, there's something to this. And I don't know, I probably had been on maybe a dozen different shows before I met you guys, and you invited me on.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about nothing and everything at the same time. And it really was one of my favorite sit downs. So thank you very much for inviting me and starting this relationship we have now, because it was, again, I think we talked about everything and nothing at the same time. And I thought it was great.
That's what podcasts are all about.
I'll do the true crime ones. We'll go on a true crime one, And I hate to say that they're boring to me, but I will tell you a terrible case, a terrible case, a terrible case.
Yeah.
This person was raped. This person was murdered. This person was kidnapped. And then I'll do it next week, and I'll do the same thing. And it's a little disheartening, a little depressing, But with the peripheral, I had a great time. I had a great time sitting with you there.
And when it comes to true crime, I don't like just talking about, here's somebody that was stabbed to death in the street.
Yeah.
And they caught the guy and he's going I'm like, what's the hook here? Mm. What is the educational lesson learned? Was it, hey, he didn't actually do it, they got the wrong guy, or he did do it and this is how he got away with it, or this is some cool shit in the investigation that they used to get him. I'm like, what is the point of telling this story? Because I'm not going to just talk about a murder for the sake of talking about a murder. It's like, why are you listening to this? And I always try to have that in the back of my mind is, what did the system do today right? What did the system do today that was wrong? How did society respond to this case? Why should you be listening to it? Mm-hmm. Not just, here's a fucking another terrible case. I don't cover serial killers anymore because I'm like, what's the point? It's just a bunch of a whole slew of dead bodies and shattered families because we want to know what makes this guy tick. Fuck that. I don't care.
And again, I'm guilty. I watch, so many of these documentaries myself because I do. I have a fascination. We all do, But there's something that always gets me, especially with the popularity of the serial killer, is shocking to me. I mean, they're almost heroes. Yeah. And then there's a funny thing with that too. We can sit here right now, and of course, you and I may be different, than the average person, but the average serial killer fan, will tell you Ted Bundy this and Ted Bundy that, or Jeffrey Dahmer this and Jeffrey Dahmer that. They'll know all the names. They can't name one victim.
Yeah.
They don't know the name of one victim, And that, to me, is just heartbreaking because you should be knowing the victims and their stories more than anybody else. Yeah. And they're not, I mean, they're glossed over, as we just mentioned before.
Yeah.
They're glossed over for almost this, and it sounds sick, but almost the triumph of the serial killer. The victim is left in the wake and nobody cares. That's exactly. People do better. All right, do better, will you?
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. We definitely are. And I guess that was my whole thing with covering serial killers is I'm like, okay, I think we know what makes them tick. It's nature versus nurture, and it's a sliding scale. Maybe they were horribly abused as a kid. Maybe mommy didn't give him his Cheerios, and then all of a sudden he just wanted to kill everyone that looked like his mom. It doesn't, I'm like, I got it. I don't need to, it's like I had that, we all have that fascination with serial killers, but I'm sort of over covering them now because I'm like, there's nothing of substance here. It's just brutality.
All right. So me and Justin talked so long here that we decided to break this into 2 episodes. Therefore, this is the end of episode number 1. Tune in next week for episode number 2. Thank you so much for listening. And please do the right thing. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time on another Nobody podcast. All the best, my friends. You are. Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey,
In drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice, when it comes to the Irish stuff, is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791. It's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers.